Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another test-driven JavaScript video. I'm recording this on March 5th, 2013. In this episode, we are starting a brand new chapter focused on design and abstraction, and I'm really looking forward to this one. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with it, and I think there might even be some surprises in here for a lot of you. Now, if you're just joining us, what we're working on here is WeWikiPaint, an application for collaborative painting in a style like a wiki. And in the last chapter, what we just finished was the ability to draw in our wiki homepage. Now this is single user only. We have the ability to draw with the mouse, and what we finished in the last chapter is we also have the ability to draw on iOS devices with touch, with your finger. And it's harder to see in the simulator where I've got a mouse pointer, but it really does work, and it's a lot of fun. So download that code and try it out. Now we also have, of course, done this all test-driven. So I can run one command, just like that, and run tests, lint, and everything on all these browsers. And it's just, I love the control and power this gives us. And it's really going to come in handy in this next episode where we're going to be doing a lot of refactoring. When we're focusing on design, we're doing a lot of refactoring. Now, before we begin, I want to just catch you up on where we're at. We're working on the minimum marketable feature of single user painting on the home page. We've just finished part of the user story for drawing a line in response to iOS touch events. What off camera I've done integration. Now what we need to do is we need to focus on simplifying and improving the code. That is our next engineering task. Along the way, we will probably modify our lint settings to handle some excess globals we have. And then we'll have a whole nother chapter, I think, on click tracking. Right now, when you draw, the line doesn't actually start exactly under the mouse pointer. It's offset a little bit according to the margin and border you have. And we need to address that. But that will come in a later chapter. Now, before we get started on this first engineering task of doing our design work, I do want to mention something that came up. Chris Klonock on episode 2 commented about Jake. Now, Jake is what we use to do our build, and specifically, it runs lint for us. It will look at all of our JS hint. It will look at all of our files and make sure there's no basic problems such as missing semicolons or forgetting a var keyword or something like that. That's really useful to have. Now, the problem with that is that if you want to see that level of syntax checking in your IDE, like WebStorm, you often end up duplicating your settings between your Jake file and your IDE, and that's no good because when you change one, the other one doesn't change. They get out of sync. So what Chris has posted is a way of keeping those in sync. You can have a .jshint.rc file in your top level directory of your repository, and you can configure Jake to use that by saying fs.readFileSync, and you can configure WebStorm to use the same file using this path here. So thank you very much, Chris, for bringing that up. I think that's a great idea. I'm not going to do that in the show because we're not really focusing on how to use WebStorm. We're more focusing on just the programming and command line stuff. But for those of you who are using WebStorm, who are looking for something a little more convenient and sophisticated, check out what Chris is saying here. I think this is a great idea. Now, let's go ahead and get started on this chapter. We have a bunch of to-dos here, most of it revolving around factoring out our common code, and that is the first thing we're going to do. I also have the suggestion back in episode 67, Danny Jones suggested that we have when we're drawing quickly, the line will stop before the end of the screen, and we can use our mouse event to prevent that. And I still want to get that in, but it's not the most important thing for us to work on right this second, so I'm just going to keep it here at the bottom of the list. Okay, let's get going on the main work of this chapter, which is simplifying and improving our design. The reason I want to improve it is because this file has gotten really long, and especially for this small window that I've got for the video, I get lost. I've edited out the times I've gotten lost, so you haven't seen it because it's boring. But yeah, I look for code and I get lost in here trying to find the right code. And that tells me that this file is too big. There are also some problems in our production code. There's still some duplication in here. Even though we cleaned it up last episode, we still have a fair amount of duplication. And I think there are ways we can resolve that too. But the main thing I want to do is deal with this large file. Now, when I see a file that's too large, and 400 lines is certainly not the largest file I've ever seen in a program. In fact, it's better than a lot of the really bad ones I've seen, but it's still too big, especially, I mean, the getting lost is the real signal. Whenever I see a file that's too big, that tells me something really, really simple and straightforward. I need to split it up. I need to take some of the responsibilities in this file and move them elsewhere. And the way I do that is I look at it and I say, well, what are the responsibilities of this module? What exactly is it doing? So let's go ahead and do that. One obvious responsibility is that we are looking at the drawing area and making, we're testing that mouse events work, and we're testing that touch events work. Okay, so that's a hint. It's doing two things. It's doing mouse and touch. So maybe that's something that we want to split apart. And then again, maybe not. Just because it's doing two things that are closely related doesn't mean that that's the best way to split this class, but it is, or this module, but it is something to think about. The other thing I see when I look down here is that we're doing this over and over again. Mouse down, mouse move, mouse up. Mouse down, mouse move, mouse move, mouse move, mouse up. Mouse down, mouse move, mouse up. Mouse down, mouse move, mouse up. That makes me wonder if maybe there's an abstraction around dragging the mouse that we might want to pull out. I don't know, something to think about. We're going to see a lot of things that we could do, but that doesn't mean that we're going to do all of them. Okay, something similar, we have the touch start, touch move, touch end. That's not quite so bad, but it's still in there. Touch start, touch move, touch end. We've got this multiple touch start, which is actually kind of clunky. And then we've got all this code about sending events, and the tests, it's necessary for the test to work, but it's not really, it's a different responsibility. We are doing tests and we are simulating events. So maybe those two things can be pulled apart. And let's see, there's also this bit about seeing what about supporting touch events. Then there's mouse stuff, send events. Oh, and then we've got this page offset thing. And that's a whole nother responsibility. That's about understanding where coordinates are relative to a DOM element. And then again, another responsibility, which is about line segments and looking inside of a Raphael element using SVG and VML. So yeah, a lot of stuff in here. That's why it's so big, and I see some things that we can definitely pull out. But the question is, yes, there are a lot of things we can pull it out, but how can we do that cleanly? How can we do it incrementally? That's actually why I'm really looking forward to this chapter, because I think as we sort of identify these pieces that need to come out and we do it incrementally, we'll rely on our test to make sure it works the whole way along, and we'll do it. I think we'll end up with a really nice code. I'm really looking forward to this. I think we're going to have awesome code by the time we're done. Right now the code is good, but it's going to be awesome when we're done. I hope. I may be making promises I can't follow through on here. Now let's look at client. So sometimes I will take a look at a test that's too big and I'll extract out test helpers. And that is one option, but I would much rather find more general abstractions. What are things that mean something to the program as a whole, not to just the tests? So let's see what we have going on in the client. Well, we're creating Raphael here, and I note that we're dealing with Raphael here, and we're dealing with Raphael here, so maybe there's a shared abstraction there. We've got this, I don't know what I have to say about that. Handling the drag events, that seems sort of central to what this class is about, which is what you do when you're dragging. But event print, event default, doing some jQuery stuff here. Continue drag, end drag. These all seem really central. Touch start. Now here we've got something this is sort of about understanding how touch events work. So that there's a responsibility that maybe doesn't need to be in here. Maybe we can factor out or abstract out the touch event stuff in some way. And we're doing the same thing here. So that sort of as a code smell. A code smell is something where you look at the code and you say, that seems a little funky. I'm not sure I like that. Doesn't mean it's a bad. It just means you look at it and you're like, I'm not so sure. And then we've got start drag. What do we do when we start the drag? Well, then we do this relative offset stuff, and then the draw line and start equals offset, that all seems pretty fundamental. Draw line, now this is more Raphael stuff. It's not central to what we're doing in this module. And relative offset, this is the opposite of page offset. These two things are really closely related. Maybe they need to be in the same module or even a class. Okay, so those are the various responsibilities of our code. And like I said, rather than just factor out a bunch of test code into a test helper, I would really like to discover some fundamental abstractions. Now, one other thing I'm noticing, and I think for most of you, you won't think that this is an issue, but I see this and I see a big potential issue. And that is we're using jQuery without protection. We need a condom on this jQuery. Yeah, it's we're using jQuery here without anything between it and our code. And we're doing it here as well. And here and here and here and here and here. I have, when you're doing Agile development, there is sort of a fundamental thing that you want to do. And that is, in Agile development, you're doing a couple of things. First, you're assuming that your code is going to live for a long time, or you usually are. And second, there is this really strong assumption that you cannot predict how the requirements are going to change in the future. Business needs are going to change, your ideas will change, the requirements will change, and your design has to be able to accommodate any change in direction, even things you don't expect. It has to handle stuff that you never even imagined. Well, that's obviously really hard. How do you create a design to go in any possible direction? Well, the way I think about it is I say to myself, whenever I see a design decision, I ask myself this: when, not if, but when I need to change this design decision, how hard will it be? That is the fundamental design question I'm always asking myself. So we're making a decision to use jQuery without protection. And when, not if, but when we decide not to use jQuery anymore and to use something else, how hard will that be to change? Well, right now, not too hard. It's just used about 15 times. But if we keep going in this direction, it's going to get worse and worse and worse, because we're just scattering it throughout. And what we'll end up with is a situation where we either cannot change jQuery at all, and if they make a decision that we don't agree with, say deciding not to support IE8 anymore, then we're stuck with whatever they decide to give us. Or we have to find another library that is exactly bug for bug compatible with jQuery. Or we have to put a lot of effort into ripping it out. So that's something I look at, and that worries me. I hate depending on third-party libraries without protection. I like to abstract third-party libraries behind my own abstraction that I control, so that when, not if, I change that design decision of using that third-party library, it's easy to do. Now, the other thing here is the abstraction we can put around it is something like a DOM element, our own high-level view of the DOM element. And what I notice is that if we do that, something that we can also put on that DOM element is page offset and mouse event handling. and maybe, and that would bring a lot of code out of here. We'd also be able to possibly do some stuff in here. So that's what I'm thinking as the place where we'll want to begin our abstraction. I want to start by taking jQuery out. We're going to continue using it, but I want to put a condom on it. I want to use it with protection. I want to have an abstraction layer around jQuery so that it's only used in one place in the system. And so when, not if we change it, it's really easy to do. So that's what I'm thinking about our design direction. I know that this is going to seem crazy to some of you, so bear with me. I think it's going to end up leading to some really awesome code. And if I'm wrong, well, you can all say I told you so. But that's what we're going to pick up with next time, is we are going to start out by abstracting jQuery into its own module or class. And what we'll do is use that as a springboard for higher level abstractions for our code. And those higher level abstractions, I think, are where the real benefit will come from. One, we'll be able to change jQuery easily if we want to, or when we want to in the future. But more importantly, we'll be able to start putting some higher level abstractions around it that are more powerful. All right. Well, I think this is going to be fun. We're going to see some really interesting stuff. This has been a lot of theory and thinking, but next time we're going to get right into the meat of it. So thanks for watching, everybody. I will catch you next time.